very welcome to our panel on composer contracts. My name is Sarah Glennan. I'm the CEO of the Screen Composers Guild of Ireland. I'm really happy to be here. I'm really enjoying this amazing festival, the World Soundtrack Awards last night were just such a treat, and it feels like a good setting to have this conversation in after everyone has fully appreciated the value of music and the emotional value of sitting in a room with an orchestra and listening to scores from films which have been life-changing in some cases and tell stories from all around the world. So I have a really knowledgeable panel with us today, so I'm going to do brief introductions, and perhaps if any of the panelists want to add then, please do. I have Valerie R at the end here. She is Strike Score founder, a composer agent, representative in PR, all-round talent music industry labels, based in Belgium. And congratulations, Ruben won the Belgian Composer of the Year, and he is one of your soundmans. And then we have Johan van der Voet. He's a composer and band manager from the Netherlands. He has spent a long time in advocacy for composers as well, working in his spare time, his extra time, I guess, to try to support sustainable practices within our industry. And he is currently a board member of the European Songwriter and Composer Alliance, ECSA, which is the organisation that my organisation is also a member of and who are hosting this panel today. And then to my immediate left, we have Aisling Brouwer, who is an Irish, I'm going to put Irish first.
Yeah.
Irish-Dutch composer, producer, artist. Notable work includes White Riot by Rivka Shah and Buccaneers, which is currently on Apple TV streaming. And it looks really good, actually. I want to watch that myself. And we have Harriet Moss at the end, currently commercial rights director at Favour Music, was with Manners McDade, is an advocate for female composers, does a lot of work in gender representation, which is hugely important in the music industry, and is a know-it-all on music rights. We're hoping. So welcome everyone. The reason we are here doing the panel is ECSA published this report last year. It is the Audiovisual Composers Contracts, Current Practices, Challenges and Recommendations. So Machiel and some of the team are here today, and they have copies of the report if anyone wants to pick it up. ECSA are funded by Creative Europe, and they're what I would describe a European umbrella group for composer organisations. They work at a European level with advocacy and lobbying. They take in concerns of all their member organisations and try to get legislators to listen and to make, I suppose, better situations. And one of the reasons that they did this report was in 2019, there was a new piece of legislation brought in, the European Copyright Directive, which was brought into different member states at different times in the aftermath of that. And one of the key principles of this is appropriate and fair remuneration for composers over the lifetime of the exploitation of the work that they have or the work that their work has contributed to. So in this case, we're talking about media composers who contribute, which I would consider a key creative element to media productions, film and TV. So one of the questions that we're trying to address at the moment is this principle of fair and proportionate remuneration over the lifetime, the economic lifetime of the exploitation of that work. So to start with, because I guess, I don't know the audience in the room, but just to kind of frame the conversation, I'm going to ask Valerie maybe to talk a little bit about the composer contract, what it aims at doing. Sometimes it's called a commissioning contract, who sends it, who receives it, and what are the main points in it.
Yeah. So I don't know if there's many composers in the room, but I'm still amazed how many composers agree upon certain conditions over the phone and not really into a written document. So the composer agreement is a written document, a legal document that outlines the conditions of how you're going to work on a scoring commission. It defines the context of the commission. Are you going to do original scoring, original songs, trailer music, opening credits, end credits? It's really really important to define that in detail. It also includes the upfront fee, obviously, invoicing schedule that is usually also linked to delivery schedule. And then obviously also assignment of rights, where can the music be used. We always try to limit that as much as possible to the use of the music just within the project, and not to give away the rights for use at any other audiovisual project, including prequel, sequel, extra seasons. And then obviously also the soundtrack release and publishing rights, which we can discuss.
So we'll get into those. So basically a legal document which frames the expectations and sometimes includes clauses which ask the composer to indemnify the work is human created and completely their authorship.
Yeah, for sure.
So that the film then doesn't become exposed to I suppose copyright challenges. So Harriet, onto the rights issue. So we have generally in the commissioning contract, as I would see it, you have the principles involved in the contract, some of the details of the deliverables, the fee, and then there's like about 3 pages of very thick legal language about rights.
Yeah, so let's go into this. Please, please, please stay awake. It's the carbohydrate slump time of day, but there's lots of different rights involved in a contract. Obviously, when you create a musical work, that is one right in itself. That's the copyright. That's your copyright. As a composer, you can choose to assign it, which is to sell it, or you can choose to license it, which is to lease it. That can be to a PRO, that can be to a publisher, and quite often that can also be to a production. If you're giving away some of your rights, it also depends, and this will be a very interesting point of this conversation, is it depends which territory you live in. So I have composers that are mostly assigned to Anglo-American PROs, so we have different rules than composers who might be with Beam Societies, but Valerie will probably be the expert on that. And what you are and aren't able to assign to when you're part of all of those different rights organizations varies territory to territory within their own rules. So yes, let's go back. You go to the musical work, that's a copyright. If you're recording it, then you've got the recorded copyright or the master copyright. That's traditionally that was always sort of owned by who paid for the master, if we go back to old recording contracts and things, but maybe that belongs to the production on a score. Ideally, if you're doing a license-only deal, it belongs to you, the composer, or whoever you choose to assign it to. So that's the copyright, the master right. You may also have the sync right, which is to license. Let's go back to either assign a license, so you could license it, and sync feels like such a buzz industry term, but it's very much just synchronizing music to picture. And you can, you might do that through your publisher and your record label, or you might do, it might be part of the production deal. What else have we got? Soundtrack rights. So you may want to release a soundtrack. Who owns it for the soundtrack? All the sort of terms part of that. Maybe the broadcaster or the streamer or whoever has their own record label, and they might want to release it. We actually have an in-house record label that we do for our agency clients through distribution with the Orchard. So we quite often do that if we can. It's a difficult part of, maybe we can come back to it, but it's a difficult part of the whole process because it's little to no money for anybody. But for me as an agent and for a composer, it's so important to the promotion and giving that musical work the life that it deserves and to be heard by the audience. But at the same time, we all know it has sort of promotional value to it and part of getting your next job. I've got so lost. Where are we? So we've done that. We've done the composition. We've done the master. We've done the sync. We've done the...
Go on to the next one again.
Oh yeah, I remember you can touch on mechanicals as well a little bit. So mechanical is really the right to reproduce that. It might be on CD, traditionally CD, vinyl, DVD, broadcast streaming. And again, that's one of those discussion points where it's different for Anglo-American societies, territories and writers, and Beam societies. So we can talk about that too. Anything else? Is anyone awake?
No, I think you've covered a lot there, and the idea, I suppose, is that when you're creating something as a composer, that you're creating both the work of art, but you're also creating copyright, which is an proprietarial and economic right. So that is sort of an asset in its own right. And then from it flows all these different, and rights are, I find there's a couple of words that have so many different meanings in this. So rights are one, but the right to use, and also then the economic right.
Yeah, and maybe let's just quickly, before we go into the conversation, touch on chain of titles as well, because that's quite important. And it can, when you are in the process and you're negotiating a contract, or your agent's negotiating a contract, or you're even pitching on a job, you can feel so in that moment that you're not, if you think about the broader picture of production, a producer is doing that with every HOD, which is the head of department. So it might be the composer, the other producers involved, the director, the script editor. There's so many people involved in a process. And when a broadcaster, production company or streamer want to either put that project up for broadcast, or they want to sell it on, which is happening more and more in this current climate, we're licensing or doing a commissioning deal with a production company, and then they're selling to a streamer, they have to be able to assure that all the rights in that whole, what we call chain of titles, are signed off or owned by them or controlled by them. So it can feel like there's a battle within your one contract, but it's really part of this huge ecosystem, which is just promising that no one's going to get sued at the end.
So it's all part really of this bundled deliverables, along with the cue sheet that that has to go along. So and it's interesting, we touched on mechanicals there, and the idea of the reproduction, which was traditional DVD and CDs, which were physical products that were being made in certain quantities, and now online has sort of had a huge disruption in that, and also across the industry. So Aisling, you are, and actually one of the quotes from, you're going to hate me for this, but one of the quotes from the report is Kevin Sargent was saying, a composer should know about rights. They should know as much about music rights as they do about music technology. It's like,
I kind of agree. I think there's a base level to that, but also, the key here is, if you have a contract, like Valerie said, read it. It's got to be in writing. Make sure you understand it at that, or you should be being paid for this project. So pay somebody to read it or manage it if that's not possible, whether that's through commission of an agent, a publisher, or maybe it's through a lawyer as well.
Knowing that, I mean, there must be, I doubt any composer's gravestone said, I wish I'd spent more time on music rights.
Well, it might do, depending on how much money they've missed out on.
Well, maybe they couldn't afford a gravestone then. So, Aisling, congratulations. You have you've transitioned, I guess, from the producer, artist now into composing, and well done. You are signed to Manu's
well, for me, it actually was the other way around. It was composer first, composer, producer first, and then the artist thing kind of happened by accident when I met the other partner in Ava Waves, Anna Phoebe. But yeah, I mean, I feel like I've been really lucky. So I'm represented by Manus Faber, and to have a person in the middle of those contracts is so important, because it means that as a composer, you get to ask questions, and you have the privilege of somebody being able to explain exactly what everything means to you, and B, you also have the privilege where you can just be the creative and positive about the project and build a personal relationship with the
Yeah.
director or, you know, the production company you're working with, and kind of leave those things separate. But before I joined Manners Faber, see, my parents both work in legal sectors, so they very much were like, you better read every damn word of anything you ever sign. So I was very much brought up with that that impact on me, and I do still actually read all of my contracts always, even though I very much leave them to do the legwork, which is great. But I do think it is such an important part, you know, of also talking about it and being able to talk to other composers about it, because a lot of the time, you know, these terms that we're signing have just become commonplace, and it's something that sneaks into the industry, and then the more people agree to them, the more we're like, oh, this is the new norm now, this is fine. And you realize that actually as composers, we have so much power in coming together and advocating for our own rights, and we have such a responsibility to protect our sources of income, because so much of it has already been taken away.
And I like that point that you're making. It is very much that slow change of culture that, because it's a delicate balance, isn't it? You are growing a career. It's very exciting to get commissioned by a big broadcaster or a big streamer or a big producer, and then you're reading the fine print of a contract that you're kind of being told many composers have already signed, or potentially saying, well, look, if you don't like these terms, and certainly I would hear that from members, you know, it's a pitching process, these are the terms, if you don't like them, don't bother pitching. And that's kind of really tricky within the industry. So
But that's the other way around, because then they expect you to already sign rights before you even started pitching.
Yeah.
So
no, I know, but this is what I am seeing happening, and it's interesting how, because behavior does change within, so the behavior of some of the larger organizations or the majors and I don't want to name check, and sometimes the behavior in the context that they're doing it makes a lot of sense, but then when it's brought to another situation where maybe the upfront fee isn't
I
as
think
big,
it's
or
important to recognize also that obviously not everybody has representation. So, you know, it's, and especially I think when you're starting out in your career, it's also, you know, you want to gain the experience, you need the experience to get the experience, and you're kind of stuck in this loophole where you're just like, well, how am I supposed to get, you know, how am I supposed to get through to the next level? So I think especially when, you know, you're just keen to work and you're trying to get a foot in the door, and then of course people tend to lower the bar of what they're willing to agree to, because, you know, they just want to work, and that's totally understandable. And so I think there's really like an accountability that the other side needs to be held to, and the production companies in terms of what they are asking from composers, because there's composers at so many different levels that, you know, it's important, I think, as composers that we support each other and we're able to hold open the door for the next generation. But it also comes with a responsibility, I think, that when you have more experience, it's a lot easier for you to advocate for those rights and to speak up and to say no to a deal that you know is a bad deal. It's a lot harder to do when you're just starting out.
yeah. And I'll go to you now, Johan, when you are unrepresented, as Aisling mentioned, which certainly in Ireland there would be quite a lot of unrepresented composers. You have to build your career to a certain level in order to attract an agent. So there's two, I suppose, very worrying practices that are highlighted in the report. One is this, and if you want to go to the slide, Michael, I would call a full buyout or a direct license, and this is something which, do you want to talk about that a little bit and kind of explain it? Again, buyout's a word that's used in multiple ways throughout things. The idea of a buyout is that you are buying out somebody's economic rights. You are giving them a piece of money now to forego future revenues, but that can be different meanings.
I think my colleagues here have made some very good points about what is all involved as a composer signing these type of contracts. And the interesting thing is that if you are not represented, you have to do it all by yourself. So I definitely want to give a shout out to organizations like ECSA, but also the local composer organizations. You know.
That's my phone.
All right.
So sorry.
We have some music. To go to your local composer association, because a lot of the times they actually have just lawyers and help, or they can point you towards good things. What I wanted to add to this is that there's also the other route. So you're absolutely clear that we're all trying to, to get bigger jobs, and I would love to be hired by Netflix, but of course their contracts, that's horrible, and there's not much for me to say to. But what does happen is that you're working with directors who are maybe not that famous, or it's not a very big production. And there, it can actually happen that your music will be on Amazon, on the streamers. I just had like a movie that I did like 10 years ago, which has now been sold to Disney.
Yeah.
So suddenly I'm a composer and I'm on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
Wow. But what also happens, and that's the warning, yes, I made it 10 years ago. But what contract did I sign 10 years ago? Am I getting money? Yes, I am. But, so, and I think a lot of composers don't actually look into the future. What are you signing away? So you have to be very wary of that. And the report tells a lot of these dangers, so to speak, and we will probably touch on those as well.
You have to compose incredible music.
Yeah.
Be brilliant at collaborating. Be a legal expert and be psychic.
Yeah,
And
that's
be grateful for the job.
that's the job. Yeah, very grateful. Yeah.
So buyouts, obviously, then this idea of the full buyout, which sought to remove, like, along with rights, I guess, are revenue streams.
Yeah.
And I like to think of composers as speculators. Really, it's a speculative career that you're in. Any talent, whether you're a composer or an actor or a producer, you're hoping that the work that you do is amazing, and everyone knows that is successful, both creatively recognized and also economically recognized, and everyone knows the proportion of projects that actually get there. But you don't know in advance. That psychic thing it's just something you hope for and something you maybe develop. But you're a speculator and also an investor, because if you're a composer working on a short film for a director, that might be their calling card to the next. But you need, so the idea of the rights, I guess, and the revenue streams, why royalties exist in this kind of ecosystem, I think, is to support that and to reward that speculation and investment.
Yeah, and I think as a composer, and I hope there are a lot of composers in the room as well, when you start out, you ask a friend to play on your score, you play instruments yourself, you need recording stuff, you're all investing in studios and stuff, and and then you get confronted with like a contract that is like a buyout, and they want everything and all your rights, and I think you have to be very wary of your economic investment in the project as well.
And that's where the buyout is a complete buyout, including the writer's share, so no more. And there's been a certain movement towards that in some parts of the industry.
Yeah, so to quickly add on that, because that's very important, we are in Europe at the moment, and complete buyouts are basically a UK-American thing.
Not in the UK, because you can't buy out the writer's share.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would say just
Yeah.
American, yeah.
So the basic is that in America, actually, the company may own the whole production, and if you can negotiate it, you might get your writer's share, but it's theirs to give. Where in Europe we have author's rights, and basically you cannot take away my author's right, even if I sign all kinds of contracts with publishing and stuff on top of that. But then again, if you're working with an American company, you better call these
Yeah, though
Yeah.
also, I mean,
ladies, I wanted to say.
so the American concept is work for hire, where you are considered an
Yeah.
employee and the copyright begins with the employer. So you are essentially, as their employee, you know, creating work that they then are the first owner to, whereas in Europe it must be assigned by writing, which is a key reason why, and I'll return to Valerie, maybe why composer contracts are so complicated as well, because there's these rules, it differs across territories in the world, and then it matters under which jurisdiction the contract that you are signing is. So it'll say at the end, this is under the court of Belgium, and in the so have you come across these? And do we have the slide with the typical buyout clause? Have you come across any contracts which have a clause which seek to do that full direct? It's also called a direct license, by the way. So it seeks to circumvent the PRO system of collecting royalties in a way, and so there's different clauses that have gone around.
Not very regularly, to be honest. But when we doubt, because they can be very creative in wording sometimes, and I think that the report on ECSA also has different examples of different types of buyouts. But then we also seek legal help, like Luc, who's here in the audience.
And I think, and coming back to what Aisling was referenced, there was a real international composer pushback when first, I think people remember, Discovery came out, I think it was around Christmas time 2019, and said, right, from now on, because we're a producer broadcaster and our titles aren't intended for further distribution, it will be a direct license. And there was significant transatlantic pushback, and that happened. But then there's also other types of buyouts. So the idea of what I would call an assignment deal is where the composer is assigning, and again, Irish-English copyright slightly differs from European, where there is a waiving of moral rights, but the essentials are pretty the same. But do you see a lot of assignment deals at the moment there, where the composer is losing all of the publisher share?
It's a sliding scale still.
Okay.
There's some broadcasters. It really depends on the negotiation, and it's all part of the negotiation. Really, it's about what the fee looks like. There's so much involved, and we're just talking about the contracts, but then that until delivery of music and broadcast is such a long process. We might have the recording budgets to negotiate within that. So it's all just part of a big negotiation. I have to say, I don't do a lot of those. I think, the best business affairs team in the world. So they do it, and that's great. And I think, but it's all part of that. And then it's quite a lovely dialogue, because we obviously have the agents, and then they're discussing it with the business affairs, and then obviously we bring the composers into it, and it's all about what does the project look like as a whole? What do we need from this project? What is the fee? And then it really depends. But it's so within my department, there's the composer agency, but there's also 3 publishing companies. So as a publisher too, it's quite frustrating, because so often we'll assign these publishing rights if it's the right project to do so. But it's not always to what I'd call a sort of the success of the publishing of that project. So there's sometimes it's not even registered, which is highly frustrating, because then that affects obviously the payment through to the writer's share and things like that. So it's not even sort of, you know, we're a publisher. We love being a publisher. We're proud
Yeah.
of being a publisher. We're a good publisher. And when someone's doing a poor job of rights that we would have liked to have otherwise, it's incredibly frustrating. So we also keep an eye on that. It's not just that the contract's the end of the process. It's us as the composers, because sometimes we're just the composer's publisher and not their agent. And we'll be saying, why isn't this registered? What's happening to these rights? And making sure that you know, the flow of royalties will reach the composer at any one point.
So I think that is one of the effects that we are seeing now, because composers are less likely or able to hold on to publishing rights. Then it makes less sense for a publisher to work with a media composer, which means that they may be missing a valuable team member, someone who can.
I think it sort of really depends on the composer too. I mean, Ashling's kind of a perfect example of the type of composer we have on our roster. A lot of them have like an artist profile as well. Maybe they're also doing, you know, a huge TV show for a streamer, and then they might go and do a documentary or a small film that we just do a license deal, and then we can do the soundtrack release, and then we still have the publishing on that, and that can all be exploited in a secondary way. So I love also doing publishing deals with people, you know, even if we're not their agent, or regardless of whether they're just doing film and TV now, because publishing is such a long-term relationship. And quite often, you know, composers who might just be film and TV composers, they may have aspiration in a few decades' time to be writing concertos and having their music performed, or releasing an album. You know, it's so lovely, I think, when we are talking to a composer, to sort of say, what do you do? You know, so many of them have so little free time between projects, but what are you doing in your time between the projects? And they're like, actually, no one's heard it, but I've written this little solo piano album, and then we're like so excited about that, and you know, want to engage with it, be like, you're so right. The publisher is an important part of a composer's team, and I think, look, I'm kind of an optimist in general, but I think where we are with contracts now is fairly stable. We've got some good support from the PROs, and that things that can't be bought out are protected, and I think that's good. And we as an agency anyway have sort of quite consistent contracts with a lot of the bigger companies that we sort of feel comfortable with. But at the same time, I think we are always sort of looking long term, and it's about how we can support those composers long term, and what does their career look like, and what does their creativity look like.
And again, back to that idea of the culture of the industry and behaviors. So the term that we've used in this report is pseudo-publishing, where a publisher is taking the rights but then not effectively exploiting them, whether not registering or not allowing further usages. So Johan, do you have any examples in your career lifetime where something that you've written for one production has gone on to be synced, or, you know, be licensed for something else, or, you know, or I think when we were at the composer roundtables yesterday, they talked about that idea of the seminal score. They were talking to Theo from Severance, and how Severance music now is played whenever anyone's talking about working in Amazon or something. I don't know, but it's that idea, something that becomes, you know, or video games, again, an industry that just went full on buyouts because they didn't think that the distribution models kind of served a royalty easily. But now we're seeing video games concerts, video games on YouTube, music being brought across screen, maybe used in the movie adaptation of the video game.
I think you made a perfect point where if you have a publisher that is publishing and is getting excited of the stuff that you're doing as a composer, that's, I would call that a perfect marriage. The problem with pseudo publishing is they grab the rights and they do nothing in return except for, you know, getting a slice of the pie. So an example of that is that you as a composer are working with a director, the director is working with a production company, and then the word gets around because you're enthusiastic, or I'm telling you like, I'm working on this great horror movie at the moment with Mark Wijstra. Oh, nice. And what happens is that some of these pseudo publishers, they actually contact the publishing company, the production company, they contact them and they say like, oh, you're doing this movie, let us, I will set up a publishing company for you. And a lot of film production companies are not music publishers. So they are only afraid to not have the right to use the music. So the pseudo publishers will say like, okay, I'll deal that with the composer. So in the Netherlands, we've seen people who are doing that consistently, getting the composer to sign a deal, and after that nothing happens, and you just lose money that you can use as a composer.
And it's for the lifetime of copyright,
Yes.
which,
Yes.
I mean, in recorded music doesn't really exist anymore. I mean, that has long been seen.
Or bringing out an album of the music, a score album.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to do that if you signed away your publishing, and that's a big problem. Yeah.
Yeah. So that, and sometimes I've also noticed that publishers might actually invest in the finance of the movie, and then, as you said, Valerie, when the composer arrives to the negotiation, the rights have already been signed away. So that is, I would consider, sort of unethical negotiation or something, and it's a difficult situation. And the production company then owns copyright, but companies fold, people disappear, and really I think that at some stage there should be, if it is a case, I certainly would like to see it for a term. So it's for 7 years and then it's renegotiated, or that the publisher signs a separate contract with the composer which outlines expectations.
They do, especially if we compare the Belgian situation, for instance, with the Dutch, I really think the Dutch situation is horrible, because when you arrive on a project, they immediately give you, even if, for instance, a Belgian composer signing a contract with the Belgian co-production company, but if it's a Dutch major production, they always try to force you to sign away your publishing rights. And the composer really wanted to do the project, the Jewish Council, the WSA, and we were really forced to sign with this publishing company that doesn't do any publishing work, and even a soundtrack release was blocked. And it's getting, there's a case building around it. But I mean, it's really it's a good point from her. I think there's some re-education to do towards audiovisual producers to really explain what music publishing.
Yeah, and we're just talking about film, but there's huge issues with this, and advertising is probably the worst space for those issues you're talking about, but also, TV and things like that.
I was just going to mention the Ivers Academy here, because they've started a fair score campaign where they're looking at a lot of these issues, and I think, similar to ECSA, it's so important that there's communication around it, between European countries as well, and collaboration.
Yeah, 100%. And I think like one of the recommendations within the report is that there's some kind of fair practice conditions which are recognized. Something, it's I suppose the characteristics of the industry are both that they're investors and speculators, but also they're solo, self-employed, so they're often blocked from collective bargaining through competition law. And then it leaves a very opaque situation. There's a lot of NDAs, which are non-disclosure agreements. So nobody really knows. I certainly, as an organization, and we're sort of similar to Ivers, I have young composers ringing, asking everything from, is this a fair fee? What does this contract say? What does this clause mean? I've been told this. And so we're creating those educational materials as well. But the producers similarly then are ringing. Their fear is, do I have chain of title? Will my American distributors and Canadian distributors be happy? What does it mean if I don't have all the rights? They obviously are more, they're trying to be more conservative in their business dealings than necessary, because as I say to all producers, once you're dealing with somebody who owns the copyright, then chain of title is secure if you agree, and they're a license can provide chain of title as much as a buyout.
Totally, and I suppose it is quite important as a composer, if you're not represented, you may still be interested in doing a publishing deal, either with a publisher that you find you have a good relationship with, or one of those publishers where you can just assign your rights on a rolling term, because I think that's also quite, when it comes to the chain of titles and the production company feeling secure and safe and that they can take this project forward and perhaps sell it on, having a publisher also do that license for you in a manner that they're used to, or that is a piece of paper even that they understand is a fair idea too.
Yeah, it's a really good point, because if you're getting to a bigger production and you are not represented, you can actually just call an agent and tell them, I have this assignment, there's this big movie I'm going to do, please help, and they will.
Yeah, they'll look, and I often find agents are more knowledgeable than lawyers, actually, when it comes to the peculiarities of a composer commissioning contract. So I definitely would recommend reaching out.
Totally. I mean, we do so much sort of ad hoc work with composers. Quite often a nice way to sort of road test a relationship too, but also as a publisher, if someone's coming to us just with a project that they want us to publish or represent, we will work hard for the commission that we take, and we might be able to even increase that fee to almost make it as if we were never there. And so that would be the sort of the real aim. And I think we often do something called an SSA, which is like a single song assignment. We can literally just publish you for an album or a soundtrack or something, but then you've got that representation and also the potential for secondary exploitation if it's allowed. Yeah, in the project.
100%. I think good team members are important, but again, it can be hard to get a good team until you're reaching a point where they can see the value in you and your work, in your future work. But one of the things that does exist in the European Union now is this copyright directive legislation, and as in addition to the notion of proportionate remuneration, it also looks for transparency. So a composer should be getting information on an annual basis about the production that their rights have been exploited in. So we in Ireland have, because we have found that this legislation, which is really valuable, has been brought in, but it's quite difficult to bring it from the legislation books into contracts. So we have agreed with the producers, we have an interim kind of fair practice sort of agreement about transparency. So we'll let you know how that goes. But that is really important. We'll be, what time are we at now, Machiel? 15, just, okay, cool. So we're kind of wrapping up the conversation now, and we will have questions afterwards. And I'd written out some of the recommendations from the report, so I'm just going to check it. One of them is composers have access to alternative dispute resolution. So has anyone managed to effectively resolve an issue with a producer that they would consider? And certainly retrospectively, this is hard. And I suspect, and I imagine there'll be questions about AI, but as we proceed into a future with AI, this may become something more. My music is, I've just heard something that's AI generated, and I know that's very like my piece. So have you had
dispute resolution today or ever, all the time? Absolutely all the time. I think it's an important part of being a publisher. We manage copyrights, we protect copyrights, and we exploit them. And when it comes to the protection of it, I mean, I'm quite fortunate. We have what I call a small catalogue, about 13,000 copyrights, and we know all of those composers and their work inside out as much as we can. So there's a lot of that just means you hear something that immediately sends the your hair goes up, and but also we just we work with as much technology as possible to be looking for fingerprinting and things like that to protect our composers' work. But it's a difficult thing to balance too, because I know on your the panel before that Emily, one of my other composers, was doing, they were talking about Philip Glass and sort of how he managed to copyright that arpeggio, and how that there's a lot of film scores that sound very similar, and that's always an issue. But it's not like a thing that you can then go into, and it's not necessarily, about protecting a copyright. But there's definitely some grey areas.
Yeah, and I think within the composer community, I think that's understood, and there's relatively little, I suppose, pushing back at other, infringement,
Yes,
composer against
if
composer.
there are any very young or just starting out composers in the room, always remember that if you are asked to copy something from somebody else, you are liable. You. So be very wary of that. And there's always this joke with temp music where you have like something from another famous composer, and then the director says like, yeah, I like it, but the melody needs to go up. Yeah, no, this note, and he's actually dictating you how to do the melody of the temp music. So be very wary of that.
And also to add to that, if you're going to work with the US at all, get some kind of indemnity insurance just in case.
Yes, which is not necessarily easy to come by and is not necessarily cheap. So this is like professional indemnity insurance, which backs you up in case there is a claim against your music. So Valerie, you discussed there the difference between the situation in Belgium and in the Netherlands. Is there any protections where, because I know there's very good tax incentives for films coming into Belgium, is there any conditions being put on that money that they...
No, so compared to the Netherlands, you have the split between author and publisher is 2/3, 1/3 maximum.
Okay.
Maximum for the publisher. In Belgium, it's 50-50, but you can divide that 50% as you like.
Yeah.
Basically.
So the same with Ireland.
So we always try to get as much as possible.
But there's no condition. So if you were receiving money from the Belgian film
there's one condition in the rules book of SABAM, and because in the Netherlands there's a lot of publishing companies that are linked to a production company. Here, a lot of production companies. Well, there's one rule in the SABAM rules book that says that a producer cannot claim more than 20% of out of the publishing.
That's interesting.
But they bypass that by creating their own publishing structure.
Okay.
So, but we're debating about it.
So they have to, I think with some PROs, you have to be a publishing company to be a member, so you can't be...
Yeah, but what's a publishing company?
I know, and then music funds as well. And then the same question, I guess, to you, Aisling, do you think that there should be conditions? So if a major streamer is coming to Ireland, saying getting 32% tax incentive to film and to do post-production and do music there, do you think it would be useful to the composer community that part of the agreement receiving that tax incentive is that the Americans, are obliged to follow Irish copyright law or European copyright law?
Yeah, 100%. I think there needs to be transparency and accountability towards companies that are coming in and employing creatives in the country that they're resident in, because that's their work environment. So I think this trend, that we've seen of like American practices kind of bleeding in, and we've seen it in the UK as well, to some degree, like for instance with ghostwriting, which is still, happening, and other issues that persist. It's important to uphold some sort of ethical standard and to fight back against it before it just becomes the new norm and we just go, oh, well, this is now how it's done. And actually, I think especially in the advertising industry can be quite a toxic place for these things, because, they'll ask the composers to basically just replicate a song that they basically don't want to pay the money to license. So then you're putting composers at risk that way. And then they'll also additionally see if they can grab a part of their writer's share or, a part of as much of the royalties as is going. And I think it's also important to remember that for composers, those royalties are what keep you afloat in between the projects. And, it's the only security
It's
You
the
really have.
sustainability.
It's the sustainability, yeah.
Cool. So quick fire round then. Johan, young composer, got a contract. What do you advise? In 2 minutes. or
Young
less.
composer with a
Who's just received their first commissioning contract, and they're unrepresented, and their parents don't work in the legal profession.
okay. Make
I mean-
make sure you check the contract first. Make sure you register your songs. Make sure you have a cue sheet, and make sure it arrives at your local CBO and.
Can I add maybe one thing? Don't start before the contract's signed.
Oh,
It happens all the
okay.
time.
It happens all the time. So, Harriet, would you ever deal with deal memos? Deal memo is something I quite like because it is the succinct points of a contract. If it's sent by email, there's some legal standing to it.
Yeah, but I'd like to get the contract done. Yeah.
It happens a lot for soundtrack releases, but that's different.
Yeah. Because we certainly in Ireland, I would see that very often, and it's the nature that maybe the director is hiring or they're having the conversation. The producer green lights it. There's talk about budget, and the contract then is sort of sent when they've delivered all of the music. And at this stage, the first edit's done, the second edit's done, there's a bit of excitement about it, a distributor comes on board, and they're saying, actually, these are now the conditions, even though maybe verbally, or maybe the composer had an understanding, and often the fee certainly doesn't rise, where the publishing is suddenly gone.
I guess there's an interesting difference because we're talking a lot about movies, but as a composer, you do a lot of music for television as well. And it works slightly different there, and it can really happen that you're actually working on a project and the contract is still not there. So we had a lot of members who made the music. The music was synced, then the music was sent out on television, and then a few weeks later the contract came, and you can imagine that they didn't sign the contract because they had everything and it was already broadcast. Sometimes it can be fun to be not represented. Yes.
Yeah, so it can work in their favor.
Yeah.
And I mean, Aisling, then obviously you have self-educated yourself to some degree prior to working with agents. So do you, like when you're looking at the details of the contract, which might be talking about the deliverables, and then you have the fee, and then you have the rights arrangements. Are you doing something, a calculator in your head? How are you going, okay, I'm all right with that fee for the publishing, or I would like a bit more of the fee, or I would like a bit more of my rights, or...
Yeah, I mean, I will say I think contracts are getting so dense and complex now. So as much as I try to self-educate, and I will also clarify, unfortunately, neither of my parents are music lawyers. That would have been amazing, but they actually knew nothing about the music business. But I think, you try and self-educate, but it is quite complex. And so I think actually reaching out to some of these organizations that, are, like ECSA, are publishing these reports and are there to kind of support and help, can be really useful. I tend to, at the start of a project, I will always start with a conversation actually with my agent and just discuss what the score is going to entail. And I would always recommend thinking about how many musical instruments you want to record live and kind of doing like a mini budget ahead, also so that you can ensure that you get paid something in the first installment, so you're not like fronting all of the costs all the time, and then you're like chasing to get paid at the end of it, and you end up out of pocket. So, there's certain things that I think you can put in place from the start. And normally, projects can range so much in fee, from having the budget to record orchestral strings to two soloists to nothing. I mean, I think if you can limit the expectations and just say, hey, listen, I understand that this is maybe lower budget. This is what I can do for that. This is what I can deliver for that. And if you want more, then this is what it's going to cost more, you know.
There's actually a couple of things on that point in terms of process that we've not mentioned about the contract, and those two would be sometimes a minimum amount of minutes of music required to sort of reach the terms of the contract. So that's quite important to note, because sometimes you could just deliver a little bit too less music almost accidentally. And secondly is, and this is why it's important to get the contract signed as early as possible, but as a kill fee, just in case something goes wrong creatively, there's a fallout, or, you know, it does happen. So ensuring that there's something in there that means any work that you're sort of have already started on is, you know, paid for.
Actually, sorry, on that note, I would also say a maximum amount of minutes.
Yes, absolutely.
Because I remember this one specific project where I think like the film was 94 minutes and the score was 91 minutes.
Wow.
And it was just like...
And they always, a documentary particularly,
Yeah.
they always underestimate. But I do about 12 minutes, I'd say, a score, and it's
But
like...
But it's interesting you name the kill fee, because I do a lot of low budget projects, so the fees are not that high. But remember that the movie, they are not forced to, you know, to bring out the movie. But what also
So
can
true.
happen, so that's a risk. But the second risk is actually because you're doing music at the end of the production. There might be other parties involved that say like, hey, this is a great project, we want to invest money. Or when suddenly there is money, there's nothing they can change about the movie except for the music, which is then suddenly they have money to actually pay a great composer. And so you're off the project. And so I always have a kill fee in my contracts, which is a lot more than the lower fees that we ask.
Totally.
It's
And
really important.
And on that point too, we can mention about in a license contract, you can also do what's called a step deal, where it might be one of those film projects that's slightly lower budget, and then they're taking it to film festivals. So we might do a sync license at a certain rate. Then there may be we can almost sort of do a step distribution deal, where a distribution deal up to a certain amount of buy can apply a different kind of license fee and things like that, because it can be so speculative at the beginning, and also it's part of that chain of titles that I sort of go back to the beginning of the production company being able to show that the people that they're selling to, look, we've licensed this piece of music, but this is the maximum it's going to cost, because you also don't want to come in and license something that they can't afford.
I like that conversation, and it is part of an ecosystem. I think it has to be understood. Working on something that doesn't do well, maybe, you know, it's important that when something does do well, the composer gets the benefit of that and can contribute. So does anyone have any questions? And can you show your hand?
No hard ones, please.
All hard ones. Yes, this gentleman. I thought there was a mic you can throw. Yeah.
I wanted to film.
Yeah. Throw it. No.
But we can repeat your question.
Yeah.
Hi, my name's Luc Gulik. I'm a Belgian entertainment lawyer. I have is there a mic? No. So I have to shout, and my voice is already broken. I'd like to add a few things from in the legal frame here. Although I'm a bit hesitant because I just heard that agents are more knowledgeable in this.
No, I didn't like that point either. Don't worry about it. I don't agree.
Sorry, just in Ireland, because we have no lawyer. This is an issue with the ecosystem. Is the lawyers work for producers because there isn't money in music now, which is really for a very small domestic economy. So
Don't mention. Now, first of all, the fact of making a composer assignment, signing a publishing deal, conditional upon signing the composer assignment deal, actually that's in breach of one of the main principles of competition law. So I don't understand why that argument isn't used more often in the dealings with producers, the dealings by ECSA, the dealings by...
So signing a publishing contract alongs...
As part of the...
Yeah.
I think Luc refers to what I was commenting about the Dutch situation, the fact that the producers try at least to make you sign with a publisher, because most of the, well, at least the Belgian composers don't have a publishing deal with a known publisher company.
Okay, so that would be against competition law.
Yes, so Luc is saying that when we get an assignment where you basically say, like, I will compose the music for your film and I will get paid something like this, in those type of deals, there's also a provision that says that you have to sign a publishing deal with company so-and-so. That's what Luc is saying, like, why don't we
Fight back,
because it's against competition law, and that's a very important thing.
Yeah.
Competition law is something that we composers know nothing about. So, yeah.
I
Thank
think
you.
it was called coercive publishing, and actually it was brought to court in Germany, and they actually ruled against it being anti-competition because they said the composer is a free agent not to sign. So this is where the copyright directive legislation has been important, and also the guidelines around collective bargaining, because it is it's trying to represent that power imbalance. So the idea that you as a free agent can walk away, and it's
is not...
no,
Doesn't mean everything.
Yeah.
It's just one court case in Germany.
yeah.
So it should be dealt with on a political level.
I think it would be really handy. I know that certainly the main broadcaster in Ireland did that, and they said you won't get paid unless you sign this. It was usually after the music was delivered, but before broadcast. And they've stopped that because there was pushback on competition law. So it would be interesting now, because a lot of the streamers, I guess, are they are with major publishers now. So would it be the same if Netflix said you must sign now with
No, because
Sony?
it's with the production, so it's a bit different. But they're already signed to a publisher. It's just about giving those rights to a production.
Yeah, but the publishing rights have to go to the publishing partner of the producer. So, but it's a tricky one. Yeah.
As long as from the moment there's an interest from the production company in another society, and they're linked, they have interests one in the other, you could say there's a breach of competition law.
Yeah.
Definitely. Another thing about buyout contracts, and also with respect to the DSM directive, in my opinion, the DSM directive can be applied in the territory of exploitation. So fair and appropriate remuneration, alternative dispute resolutions, all that can be invoked by a composer if it's not taken care of, can be invoked even if his or her contract is under US or UK law.
Okay.
And that's another avenue that should be investigated, I think. Because the territory in question is the territory of exploitation.
Yeah, and that is, I would love to see that happening. I would love to see that legislation being brought into practice more and being tested more. And I think the obstacle to that is the cost of bringing something to court and who can do that. But we are certainly working in Ireland, and there's going to be a review at the EU level on the legislation this year. So I would encourage anyone who is members of organisations to ask your organisations, are you talking to your local legislators about the copyright directive and the review? Because I think it's really important that I don't think even transparency has really been brought in yet. And I think the producers are kind of hoping that the response is, this is too complicated, it's unworkable, make it go away, kind of thing, or make it all waivable. Thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank you for the comments.
Do we have any other questions? Surely there is. Oh, yeah.
Hi, I have a quick question about agents because that was briefly touched as well. I'm starting out music for film. I'm doing short films, short animations, and I've heard a lot of conflicting advice regarding agents as to when to approach them, if I should approach them. I've heard people saying you don't approach an agent, you wait until an agent decides to approach you, and then I've also heard people just even if you haven't done anything, but if you feel you're capable, just go and talk to them. So I don't know, what's your advice?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. It's because that's conflicting advice because all agents are very, very different, and sort of work with the rosters very differently too. What I would suggest is maybe start with composers that you admire, or that you think your work could go in a similar sort of trajectory to, and look at who they are represented by, and either reach out to the agents directly to ask that exact question. What we get hundreds of submissions a week, and we do try to communicate as best we can with as many of those as possible. But just ask the question at what level, and that's sometimes better to have a sort of direct question than we can answer than here's this film I did and here's this showreel and and so much sort of information that we don't necessarily have the time to digest and give the attention that we would love to give it. But also you can talk to the composer, because it's nice when composers have an sort of internal dialogue within that community as well, but asking them how they first got the agent that they're working with, or perhaps if they need any sort of assistance too. We often meet a lot of the new up-and-coming composers we sign when they start off as composer assistants or as music editors, or on other jobs and things as well. Copyists, there's a whole variety of roles in that team. So you could communicate with the agents themselves, or go to the composers. It's also, you've done a great step in the work, which is coming to an event like this. You get to network with a lot of people, hopefully meet people within your community of composers, and also the kind of ecosystem of agents too. So good job.
Thank you.
Just to add to that, because when I signed with what was then Manners McDade, I think it's now 8 or 9. No, it's almost 10 years. Yeah. Is it almost 10 years? Oh God. That's confrontational. It's longer ago than it feels, which I guess is a good sign. So it's a while ago, and at that point, I really didn't have much experience. I was really determined and sure that this is what I wanted to do, but I was still very much just stuck on the outside looking in, and just working so hard to take any little job I could get to just get a foot in the door. And I'd say 90% of, having a good agent relationship, it's just personal relationship, really, and you build it. And, it's been amazing with you guys that it's been so long, because you feel like you really build on something together. And it's people, it's just people that you're working with closely every day. And so I think it's important that you feel like it's a safe place for you, and that you have the same vision for your career. And I think Harriet's advice is really good, actually, to think about where you see yourself. What kind of roster would you like to be on? What kind of composers do you want, in your ether? Or, how do you place yourself? And to start there, and then see if you can start working with them or for them, and get to know people that way.
I think it's really important that you do a lot of research on the industry you're going to work in, and who's who, and all of the different, from agent, publisher, all of the different other HODs that you're going to be collaborating with in the team of film or TV series, and all of the different competencies that you should know, from legal to rights, engage with your PRO, go to film festivals, find your composer representative organization, and that kind of establishes you in a place where you will encounter agents or agents will encounter you, and that idea of then, and also social media is a great way, LinkedIn, and following careers, and best of luck. Any other questions? Do we have time for another question? And
Thank you.
do you want to put the last thing on? So there's a QR code on the screen there, which you can download the report and read it. And it provides the, I suppose, recommendations at the back. And please engage, like I said, with your organisations and input your suggestions or your needs. So any further questions? Will I ask the AI clause question? Is there? Well, it's part of the composer contract. So the fact that you might have a clause in your contract that will opt you out. So under the current EU AI legislation, a composer must opt out, reserve their rights. Valerie? Valerie will answer it.
Well, not personally maybe, but my colleague Barbara is very much involved in the everything around AI Act. She works for screenwriters and directors as well, so and is lobbying around the topic. So she's the one that always adds an opt-out clause into our contracts. Yeah.
Okay, and I think that's important. It's better to be safe. I think anyone who has rented an apartment and has signed a lease, you have contract experience. You just have to move it now into this world and break it down yourself, and whatever way you can. You can find a lot of resources on composer contracts as well online. Just be conscious of the source. Is it American? Is it European? Is it Dutch? Is it Belgian? One more question. No. Oh, well done. Yeah.
I'm paraphrasing, and I'm not sure on the numbers, but per department, production companies. Thank you. Per department, production companies can submit requests for funding at FUF, and I believe for screenwriting, it's I think $25,000 euros or so. But it's only been 3 years or 4 years that the production has to pay this, the screenwriter that amount. So like sometimes all the different funding gets lumped in one sum, and then production just pays as they see fit. It's only been a couple of years that they have to pay the screenwriter the amount that FUF provides.
FAF is the Flemish Film Fund.
And probably some other like Brussels screens or whatever Belgian Film Fund or so might have a similar rule. Does that exist for
No, but I don't know
scoring?
if you're familiar with the grant that Sabam, the grant that you can apply for as a screen composer. They have one for original scoring for feature and one for series. And so, depending on each of them, for film, the music budget needs to be 1.5% of the total budget of the film, the original scoring part, so no clearances. And those grants exist to co-fund the music production costs.
And is that the composer that needs to apply for that, or is it the production?
Theoretically, it's the production company, but depending on if they propose a decent fee, we wouldn't necessarily apply for it, because then we try to use it for other projects. But we always suggest it on low budget projects. And for feature film, you need to have an international co-producer. Yes, their criteria is really outlined on the website, and I know that is Booma considering is in the Netherlands is also considering the same system.
And France has a similar fund as well.
In France, the film fund also has a grant for film scoring. And you can even combine the film fund one and the SACEM one.
And the interesting thing is that the starting budget must be 1.5. So before you apply for the fund, it must be. So it's not about trying to reduce what's there.
It's like an
more about-
incentive to make aware,
Yeah,
to make the producer aware of the fact that
we are lobbying
that's
for one
like
in
a
Ireland.
minimum.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we're lobbying for one in Ireland. So it's supposed to supplement a score for a film that doesn't have a huge budget and could maybe benefit. But that's an interesting. I know in Ireland as well that it's development funding, and there's always an argument between the producer and the writer as to who gets what share, and often the producer takes more maybe than the writer is happy with. So. Cool. Thank you. So are we complete? Are we all ready to go and get a pick-me-up? I would encourage you all to look again at the report and to learn more about ECSA. And if you would like a paper copy, Machiel has some down here at the front. Enjoy the rest of your Gent Film Festival, and thank you very much to the World Soundtrack Awards for facilitating this panel, and thank you to our panelists, Valerie from Belgium, Johan from the Netherlands, Aisling from Ireland, Netherlands, but based in England, and Harriet from the UK, and I was Sarah from Ireland. So
Thank you, Sarah.
thank you all very much.
Thank you. Is it true that composers are only approached by agents, not the other way around?
C'est 16h40, ça veut dire qu'il faut partir dans combien de temps? Non, pardon. Non, 17h40. Claire, juste, je t'envoie les trucs des échanges là. Ouais, ils ont continué ça. Que...
Ça, c'est